Hello and welcome to my Royal Crossbow testing video, part 2. Part 1 was versus the 4 God Wars generals, and a lot of people liked it and were asking for other bosses, so I figured I'd make a part 2 versus other bosses. First up we've got Nex. I did it in a trio. Everyone had Pernix, Divine, Royal Crossbows, and obviously Royal Bolts. First up I'd like to thank XX Gotcha and Smokey9112 for getting the crossbows and help me out for testing them on Nex. So again, thank you both. So the next thing I'd like to say is that we had a very small sample size. We only did 4 kills in total, one with Chaotic Crossbow and Ruby Bolts, and the other 3 were with Royal Crossbows and Royal Bolts. The fastest kill with the Royal Bolts out of the 3 that we did was 1 minute and 30 seconds faster than the Chaotic Crossbow kill. Now obviously that was just the fastest of the 3. However, the other 2 were a little bit faster than the Chaotic Crossbow kill anyways. So I'd say Royal Bolts are probably overall better, at least for the first, second, fourth, and fifth phase. The third phase would probably still be better with the Ruby Bolts and Chaotic Crossbow, because we were having quite a bit of trouble with the Blood phase. However, it could have just been bad luck, because as you know, a lot of the Blood phase is determined by your Claw specs and Ruby Bolt specs. So next thing I'd like to say, we did use Ruby Bolts and the Chaotic Crossbow on the Reavers due to the fact that we didn't want to share the bleeding effect between Nex and the Reavers. Now, it's not proven, but I think if you attack a monster just once, it will do the bleed effect on that as well, and it will share it between the two. For example, if you hit a Reaver once while you're hitting Nex, or like after you hit Nex and then go back on Nex, it will share the bleeding effect between the two of them, which we didn't want that to happen because we wanted Nex to be taking on the damage. Thus explaining why we switched to the Chaotic Crossbows to poke the Reavers once. So yeah, if you do have a Chaotic Crossbow, I'd bring it for the Blood phase until people can figure out what's definitely better for the Blood phase or Nex in general. And because, like I said, I've got such a small sample size, I don't want to take any of my results as fact. So a few more things I'd like to say about the Royal Crossbow versus the Chaotic Crossbow during Nex. You're obviously not using Ruby Bolts, so you're not going to be damaged by the Ruby Bolt spec, which takes 10% of your current LP every time you spec with them. It does seem to be quite a bit faster on the minions, but I'm not 100% certain on that actually, because like I said, I'm not a professional tester and my sample size is really small. If anything, the best time to use the Royal Crossbow during Nex would obviously be the last phase, seeing as Ruby Bolt specs are capped at 300 during that phase, and also it's believed that she raises her defense with Turmoil on the last phase. However, that is not proven, or at least to my knowledge. And as we finish up the kill, I think that's all I really want to say about the Royal Crossbow at Nex. It is good, and it could be definitely better than the Royal Chaotic Crossbow, sorry. However, like I said before, my sample size is so small, so do not take anything you see in this video as fact, for any of the bosses for that matter. Okay, so the next thing I want to test is the Queen Black Dragon. I'm not using a Steel Titan or Dreadnips because I figured that would corrupt the results. I only tested the Chaotic Crossbow versus the Royal Crossbow in the first phase of the QBD, and they were about the same speed. I timed it and everything, and oh yeah, it was about the same speed. However, I'd like you to take into consideration the fact that it does take a while for the Royal Crossbow to charge on the QBD, and that is probably why it was about the same speed. However, overall, for a full kill, I would say the Royal Crossbow would be about 10 to 20% quicker, or more efficient. And also the bolts are cheaper and everything, so yeah, definitely go with the Royal Crossbow if you are deciding for the QBD. Next thing I'd like to say is if you do have Dragonbane bolts on you, you probably want to use those first because from what I've heard, they're a lot better than Ruby bolts. And probably a lot better than Royal as well. And but I wouldn't make them because they do take a while to make, rather than just buying Royal Bolts for like 100 each or whatever they go for now. So anyways, yeah, that's the Queen Black Dragon, and let's move on to the next boss. Okay, so next up we've got Tormented Demons. First thing I'd like to say is never to use this crossbow on Tormented Demons as it does not work very well at all. The bleeding effect doesn't even work while the TD is praying range, so that's not even a bonus there. And yeah, that's about all I have to say for TDs. Okay, so next up we've got Mithril Dragons. It does work pretty well in Mithril Dragons, probably better than the Chaotic Crossbow. However, it probably does not work as good as the Polypore Staff or the Storm of Armadyl Staff with the Storm of Armadyl spell. But yeah, it works really well on the Mithril Dragons, hits accurate, and that's the main bonus of this bow is just how accurate it really is. Obviously the max hit is not a bonus, but the accuracy really just does tear through anything really. Compared to melee, I don't really know how well it works. I never really killed Mithril Dragons that much, only for Slayer tasks. Other than that, yeah, I've never really killed them, so I couldn't really tell you if it's like up to par with the melee tactics currently. It probably isn't as good as a rapier, but then again, I have no idea. All I know is they do have really high defense, and I was getting pretty decent kill speeds, so yeah, it's a potential winner at Mithril Dragons. And next up, we've got the Corporeal Beast. As you probably expected, it does not work well in the Corporeal Beast at all. The hits are halved, and yeah, doesn't even really work that well. So yeah, definitely go with the Chaotic Crossbow if you're going to be ranging the Corp, even though you should never range the Corp anyways. And next up, we've got the Kalphite Queen. It works acceptably good on the Kalphite Queen, especially considering how the Kalphite Queen is currently praying range, and it seems to ignore that. So yeah, it works really good. You can definitely use it in a solo. It'd be probably better than the Chaotic Crossbow, but like I said, I'm not a professional Kalphite Queen Slayer, and I'm proud of that fact. And look at me risking it at like 200 LP. And last but not least, we've got the Fight Kiln Jad. A lot of people were asking me to do the other Jad, however this one's the same thing, it's just a lot easier to get to. The only difference is it's got higher defense and it also halves the attacks by range. So just imagine everything I'm hitting times 2. And yeah, it does work very effective on this Jad, and it probably works obviously twice as effective on the other Jad because this one halves the attacks from range. And yeah, it is probably better than the Chaotic Crossbow. I'm no expert on Jad, and I always Storm of Arm on my Jads, so I can't say for certain that it is better than the Chaotic Crossbow. However, it definitely seems like it. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching.